Thank you very much for joining our session. We're going to talk a little bit today about how do we deliver value, business value, through data and AI strategies. How do we take the ideas and the products and technologies that we have available to us and turn those into business value? My name is Matt Quinn. I'm the Chief Data Officer for Microsoft UK, working in our Azure space with our data and AI products, and looking forward to sharing some thoughts with you today. I'm going to start with a picture of this Victorian gentleman. I've not had anyone yet guess in the slides that have a build on this who this is, but he coined a phrase that growing up in a house where advertising was part of our kind of life, this phrase of half the money I spend on advertising is wasted, the problem is I don't know which half. And whenever I use this slide, when there's a CMO in the room, they have a kind of wry smile, even in this data-driven world that we live in today. What I think John Wanamaker, who ran department stores in New York in the 19th century, is alluding to here is a data problem. He doesn't have the data, but actually it's not so much a data problem, it's actually needs information. He needs information about where is he spending money that he could deploy better elsewhere. Actually what he wants to do is take action. He wants to change where he spends his money to deliver greater business outcomes for the same capital invested. So whilst this starts, in my mind, a real why conversation for data, the reality is, and I always ask this question next, why do we care about data? For somebody who has data in their job title, I would actually argue we don't care about data. We care about insights that can be gleaned from that data, and we care about actually the actions we can take based on those insights. So data on its own is raw, unprocessed, but it's not really connected to the value that it can deliver. It's not connected to the insights, the actions, until we do something with it. And I want to use this as an example. I've kind of stolen this slide. You can tell by the fact it's got a kind of beam at the bottom where it was actually stolen from a video in the middle of a presentation. This is, at a very high level, how Microsoft Copilot works. And everybody's very excited about these large language models. And I use the analogy that these are a very magic Lego brick in a whole kit of tools to build an application, to build a solution that delivers business value. So the large language model is very powerful, it's a huge component, but the reason Copilot is valuable is when I as a user ask it a question, and my favorite prompt is, come back from holiday, what's my boss been up to? The large language model understands natural language and it is able to interpret, actually by boss he probably means line manager. But the large language model on its own has no value for what that does. It then connects into a data source, which is organized and structured, in this case the Microsoft Graph, everything you have in SharePoint and Teams and your email, mailbox and your calendar, to reach out and go, line manager for Matt, that's Enrique. And actually, what's he been up to? That might mean meetings that we've been in together. So then can I go and get the summarization of the notes from those and surface those up in the response? So the large language model is understanding what I'm saying, and it's grounding that in a quality set of data that has a lot of semantics and meaning. So this combination is how value is delivered to me as a user from a large language model and from data that lives in that graph. So how do we think about doing that on a grander scale? When we think about delivering value from data in our organizations, the data that pervades everywhere, the most common fallacy is thinking that it's just about technology. And I work in a product company, so it's very tempting to talk about product all the time. The reality is, the technology is almost the easy bit. It's the people and the process that surround that govern that data, that curate it, that put it in the hands of people where and when they need it in order that they can change an action. John Wanamaker could maybe choose where he spends his ad money. A production manager can perhaps change the process through which they deliver value. A financial advisor might change the strategy for the portfolio that they're going to advise you on based on the data that's there. The reality is that's a huge change management problem, a huge change opportunity, but it's one of those challenges. And the technology that enables that almost needs to come last. From a huge piece of research that Microsoft drove with Ipsos, they delivered effectively research that led to the idea that there are 5 drivers of extracting value from data and AI. And they've turned these into a strategy roadmap. So when we think about how do we harness the capabilities of data, we need to start with, and I actually changed this slide, in the corp deck that we have, the technology strategy is somewhere in the middle. I actually think the technology strategy needs to be driven last, based on all of the capabilities that we need in our organization first. So I start with organization and cultural strategy. What is it that our organization is trying to achieve? And that can be grounded in very strategic objectives that are probably, if we're a public organization, they'll be in our annual report. There'll be strategic initiatives that the board are saying they want to drive as an organization. Where are they? What do those do? And how can data enable us to drive those? How can we use data to drive insight and actions that will measurably impact the measures we have for our organization already? We don't necessarily need to invent new measures, new ways of measuring value, if actually we've got ways of measuring success already. Customer satisfaction and net promoter score is one great example of that. We have a measurement framework already. So then what's the business strategy? Are we an acquisitive organization where we're going to grow by acquiring and integrating new companies, and we'll need a technology strategy and a data-driven piece where we look at cross-pollinating and white space and deduplicating as we merge up organizations? Are we a organization that is looking to vertically integrate, or to take the services and products that we have today and expand horizontally into new markets? These will all drive what insights, what actions do we want to be able to take based on data? And once we get there, then that should inform how do we want to apply the experience we've got? What expertise do we have in our organization today? That might be technology, that might be change management, it might be process engineering. What capabilities don't we have, or a commodity that we want to build or buy into the organization through either acquisition or through bringing in technology partners? And then if we're going to go on this journey and we're going to take the proposition that we're going to use data to deliver value in our organization, we need to recognize that the quality of that data, the veracity and the ability to trust that data is going to be critical to our success in execution. So thinking about how do we bake data and AI into our governance structure. There's a blessing and a curse here. Data is an asset, but it's not on our balance sheet. Most organizations, when they have assets that do exist on our balance sheet, they naturally fall into a governance structure, whether it's the laptops that we have that all have an asset tag on them because they have to be tracked and depreciated, and the process for doing that is well governed. With data, it doesn't sit on the balance sheet. So it doesn't have a natural governance framework that reports into standard corporate reporting. The upside of that is we can be very creative with how we account for data. We can be very creative in how we leverage that data and how we use it to bring value to the organization. But there probably isn't a standard way of measuring that spans all organizations. So how you build this data and AI governance strategy, how you build this into your existing governance structures in a way that's not lock it to the floor, nobody can touch data, because then you've missed the opportunity to harness the value. The balance between agility and control needs to be baked in. So then when we do this, all of this should inform our technology strategy. What kind of products do we need? What kind of services do we need? What can we buy versus build? How can we reduce the low value adding tasks of engineering and humping data back and forward? How can we simplify our journey by making smart technology choices? I've preempted my own slide by unpacking the next bit, so I won't unpack the full details of those. So when we think about this, the journey that we're on, each organization will be in a different part of maturity. And the reality is, certainly for larger organizations, each part of the organization will also be on a different stage of that journey. So assessing where are we today on that journey, building that management framework, and actually I was really pleased to see on a stand at the bookstore around the corner, Caroline Carruthers and Peter Jackson's book, Halo Data, talks about how do you add science to measuring the value of data. I think it's a really important piece of work for how do you create value. First of all, you need to know where I am on that journey, then where I want to get to, the strategy we just talked about, and then map the steps that we need to take on that journey. So what does that look like? We see through this research that organizations tend to be in one of 5 stages. As I say, in larger organizations, you might find Department X is very mature and Department Y is in a slightly different state, and maybe there's a whole organizational piece to try and rationalize or learn from each other. But organizations are either exploring, and this applies to data and it applies to AI. AI is typically a little, or generative AI particularly, is a little bit more nascent in its journey. But organizations are exploring. They're dipping their toe in the water. They've maybe got lots of data. They've done the obvious things with reporting and analytics and driving corporate reporting and functions, but actually how do we think about monetizing data? How do we think about the plan that's going to enable us to unlock real value? And when I talk about monetizing data, lots of people start thinking immediately about selling data to the outside world, taking a cash value for it. That's not what I mean. When I think about monetizing data, I think about extracting value from it. So either turning that into an insight that lets me take action that delivers value, deliver an efficiency in a process, or break into a new market, or outcompete a competitor by having better insights. The beauty here is when you start to do this and move from proof of concepts into production, you start to unlock value. And in an agile kind of methodology, rather than building this ivory tower and spending 3 years kind of building that destination and then hoping it will work, actually starting small with areas of functionality that deliver business value aligned to your strategic objectives is really critical. As you start to do this, you'll unlock value, you'll build capability, you'll train the organizational muscle for how to do this at scale. Take that expertise and centralize that in a capability, not as the gatekeepers of this, but as the enablers of the wider organization to execute and repeat what's been built. This is when you start to be able to scale the projects. How do I take the lessons that I've learned in one pocket of the organization and bring them to others? We actually see this in a cross-organization, particularly within the public sector. How do we take the skills that we've got in one department? Actually, the real value of that data is only when we add context. We enrich the data that we have privately with data from external sources. Those two combined can deliver significantly great value. This is when you start to realize the value, repeat the process, scale your adoption. And organizations are in lots of different states for this. This is a slide I've liberally stolen from one of my retail colleagues. In it, he talks about these strategic drivers. These are the things that are in your board report. And I love this slide because I'm a massive Simon Sinek fan, and it really aligns to my mind. This is why. This is why we need data. This is why we want AI capabilities in our organizations. These are the things our customers want to do. In this retail example, that might be brand loyalty, customer experience, operational efficiency. It might be organizational pieces around culture and talent. And that why links into what? These are data products. These are pieces of functionality that allow us to take data and turn it into insight. That's what John Wanamaker was looking for, the insight of where is my advertising spend well spent. In the marketing and advertising piece, for example, that would have been a key what he wants to do. But all of these are grounded in how. How do I build the data capabilities in my organizations? The risk is, as technologists, it's very tempting to start on the left. Shiny toys, a new data platform, a data engineering capability, an AI model. What I would always encourage organizations to do is connect this through the data products you want to build a capability and link them very clearly to your organizational objectives. If you don't do that, the risk is it will become very difficult to continue to get funding. So your internal organization needs to recognize, the board needs to recognize, the CFO needs to recognize what you're spending money on over here helps us as an organization achieve a goal over here. When we do this right, we start to deliver real value. So how do we get here? How do we arrive at this point? And I talk about the evolution of data platforms. In the beginning, someone built an application, and there was a database underneath it. And it was good. So we built more applications, and more applications. And applications through the 90s and the noughties proliferated everywhere. We ended up with loads of applications, data stuck in silos in different functional pockets of our organization. So then we recognized that actually the real value is going to be when we bring this data together. How do we bring this together? In the data warehouse motion in the early noughties into the 2010s, the ability to bring this data together was really powerful. But in doing so, lots of data engineering work happened. Lots of smart people took the data that was in here, extracted it, conformed it, normalized it, trimmed the edges off of it. And in doing so, we answered whatever questions we designed this data warehouse to do, but the question we never thought of is suddenly unanswerable because we left a piece of data behind. So in the last 10 years, we've seen the evolution of this architecture move to this more medallion architecture, where less data engineering in the first stage, rather than finessing the data before we move it, take that unfettered data and drop it into a raw integration layer, a bronze layer. Here, different personas might interact. A data scientist wants the context, the extra fields, the rawness of that data, and has the skills to be able to interpret and understand and turn that into value. But data engineers can then filter and clean and augment that data up into various quality levels for silver and gold, so that actually, if I'm in the business and I just want to know what my sales numbers, how my advertising doing, I can build my own dashboards and analytical capabilities, or I can use pre-canned ones with a gold trusted set of data. So this medallion architecture has evolved as the data platform. The real important fact here is that we're not losing or leaking data. The context is as valuable as the data itself. And often we don't know how we will realize value from data until far after it's been loaded into the data platform. So the ability to do that and then discover that data, that requires good labeling, good governance, good control, good cataloging of that data. Most organizations, when they've started this journey, they end up in a starting line where maybe two different technical teams have started to build these capabilities. They've taken a data management platform from over here, they've taken compute engines from over here, storage over here, a different integration vendor, and they build a very complex set of capabilities that, based on those technologies, was how you did this. But lots of work happens in order to massage and manage this data, and when any one of those products evolves or iterates, the next version comes out, more manual labor happens. And as we look at the proliferation of vendors that are in our data ecosystem, if you're trying to integrate multiple products, typically 50 to 100 different products from different vendors, huge portions of your resource will be spent just keeping the plumbing working, as each one of these is going to be patched on a regular basis. Our thesis with Fabric is that lots of that integration work will still be required, but can we, at the heart of our platform, simplify and reduce the amount of low value adding tasks of humping data from A to B? And this is where Fabric comes in. We start to bring together this concept of operational data. That might be first-party services like SQL, it might be open source database technologies, it might be third-party vendor products. We look at analytics capabilities, the engines that will drive compute and drive insight out of that raw data. Again, they could be first-party engines, they could be third parties, they could be Databricks where it's a third-party product but a first-party service, or Snowflake where it's a third-party engine. How do these analytics capabilities surface the data and deliver it, make it available to AI Studio and our governing tools to rapidly build and iterate AI capabilities grounded in the data? And how do you govern and manage all of this? So this vision is where Fabric comes from. The intention being to simplify, starting with the storage as one lake. So the key differentiating capability here is actually the data can be stored once, and regardless of which capability you want to interact with it, whether it's Power BI or Data Factory or Synapse Engineering or you're a data scientist, you don't have to make multiple copies. I can load the data in from data integration, from Data Factory. My data scientist can use that same data without having to make multiple copies of it. They all use the same underlying open data format, and different compute engines can all read against that. So suddenly we reduce the amount of manual labor just humping data back and forward. We simplify the ability to mirror operational data into this world. So if you're using Azure SQL Database, if you're using a Snowflake, if you're using Cosmos DB, you're using multiple vendors externally, you can configure mirroring. Traditionally, that would have been something a data engineer has to build a pipeline. Every time the schema changes, we have to re-engineer it. Something changes, we have to observe. We have to drive rework and remonitoring, remodeling. By mirroring that and making that a turnkey exercise, you reduce a lot of the low-value tasks that are happening in your organization. And at this point, I often use the analogy of spreadsheets and accountants. Accounting and bookkeeping was a very manual task. You had a ledger, you put all the numbers in it, you added them all up. If you'd made a change, you had to go and add the numbers up again. When spreadsheets came along, they removed a lot of that drudgery. Did it make all the accountants redundant? No. It removed that manual step and allowed them to do higher value tasks, understand what those numbers mean. What's driving those numbers? What could I actually do to help my organization be more effective and deploy its capital differently? Removing the manual data engineering work, the low-level grunt work from some of these tasks can enable those same data engineers to do higher value-adding tasks, to enrich that data, to perhaps map external data sources into your internal data sources, to deliver context and value from that underlying data. But sometimes there'll be data that doesn't live in this one lake, and you don't want to have to make copies of that just for the sake of surfacing it to these capabilities. So that's where shortcuts come in. Now we have the ability to project data. So let's say it's an Amazon S3 or it's in a Google service. You can map that in one lake. As far as these capabilities are concerned, that data lives here. When you query that data, it actually pushes it off to the underlying source on Amazon or GCP or in third-party services and runs that query live. So you don't have to hump the data from a third-party service. If you want to bring data in from external sources, you can do that in a fast way with low integration. There are cases, from a performance perspective, you might want to mirror that data into one lake just to get the kind of performance you're looking for. But if it's ad hoc, perhaps a business project is looking for experimenting with this data, you can do that quickly. You can iterate, you can test without having to do loads of engineering first. You can start to build capabilities and prove that they work before you do huge amounts of work on landing zones and underlying platforms. So the vision then is this data is available in or via Fabric. That's great. Now we have data, we probably have insights. In order to turn that into action, we need the ability to put this into the hands of the people who run our organization, who serve our customers, who run a process. And this is where it becomes really important to make the ability to surface data and insights, bring that into the applications that run our organization, whether it's service, supply chain, finance and operations, customer service. Put it into the modern worker tools, whether I'm using Excel or I'm building a PowerPoint to report on what my numbers are and what my plan for next year is, or I'm using a Copilot. I want to make that data available so my users can understand it, interact with it, and take action. If I'm a professional developer or a professional data engineer, I want the ability to build data products, surface that data into AI Studio, build my own capabilities, leverage tools like Azure Databricks, use some of the compute engines along with models to build the kind of capabilities that I want to deliver in the organization. But this isn't the world of 10, 20 years ago where the idea was that a vendor would try and own it all. Fabric recognizes that we have an ecosystem that will not all be first party. Some of this data might even live in other clouds. I've heard rumor it happens. These capabilities, these engines of operational efficiency are where your data might need to be surfaced. And when you do this, you need to be able to do it securely, you need to be able to govern it, to get line of sight left to right across your organization so that people can discover the data that you have, they can trust the data that you have, and that might be our first-party products, it might be your in-house governance processes, it might be third-party products that you already use today and you want to bring those into that Fabric world to enrich and expand their capabilities. How you secure and govern that data is critical. And I alluded to this idea that Fabric's vision is that data lives everywhere. Data needs to be used to surface insights and to take action by everyone across our organizations. That's going to mean third parties. It's going to mean data from the marketplace. So if you're buying data from LSEG, for example, the ability to surface that data directly in your platform. For an analyst to be able to consume that data, to buy that, to license it and bring it into the platform without having to go to IT and ask for a change ticket and an integration project and a whole life cycle to be spun up. These are capabilities, whether you're using Teradata or you want Esri data or Informatica and lots of the vendors who are here today, these are capabilities you want your citizens in your organization to be able to bring in exactly when they need. I'm going to wrap up there and I'm going to summarize by saying the key to this journey is thinking about the holistic picture. I would ask and encourage all of us to take a step back from the exciting pieces that we're seeing with technology and turn those into opportunities to align what's the business outcome I'm driving. And if we think about the 5 whys, why am I doing this? And push that question one level further. Why are we doing this? Why are we delivering this capability? What problem are we solving in the organization? What's the business value? Who is the customer, the ultimate sponsor for this project? When you align your data capabilities through data products to your strategic initiatives, you can help connect the dots between the outcome and the input. You can justify your board's investment in you, in your team, in the products you're asking them to fund, and this is where you'll deliver real value for your business through your data and AI strategy. Just going to signpost a couple of extra slots. Our EMEA lead tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock is going to be in the Y-Axis keynote theatre. We have John Melinda, I can see on the front row, is going to do a federated data platform session at 2:40 today. We have an exciting session from Neera Everon tomorrow at midday for AI What's Next, and a modern analytics session by Anoop, who is also here, at 3:20 next door today. So lots of sessions and opportunities for us to learn. We are also on stand, let me get the number right, stand Y430 right in the middle. We have a load of our technical specialists. I'll be there with our customers. We have a lot of people on the stand. If you want to unpack some of those things and think about how do I turn that strategy into execution, then do come find us. At that point, I think I'm supposed to ask for any questions, and we may have a roving mic, and I think that means I need to put headphones on. Stunned silence and tumbleweed. Who's going to go first? Someone. Or do I take that as a clarity that I've answered everybody's question and I can go home now? Look, thank you very much. Oh, we have a question.
Thank you for an interesting talk. One of the questions that we often come across is that when we take about some of the organizational KPIs, you mentioned customer satisfaction as an example. There are various drivers that would drive customer satisfaction and not just maybe a platform, right? So what are the best practices that probably you would have seen, and how do we address that? It's not just one initiative. There are probably 1,000 initiatives trying to tackle that KPI from an organizational success perspective.
Absolutely, it's a great question. So I think the key piece there is, what we're saying is, how do we fundamentally want to change the customer experience? We have measurement framework for that. What are we going to change in order to drive that? So if we think about this, this is a business process change. I'm going to change something that I do in my organization. If I'm going to change something, I like the scientific method. I like to change one variable at a time and then measure, did it make it better or worse? Because sometimes we might introduce a change and it makes it worse. So actually, in order to inform and understand, have we made the right changes, we need data. Like, we need the insights into that. So I think really connecting this tissue is, it's not that the data platform is going to magically solve this problem, but the answer to, am I making my organization better or not, is going to be grounded in data. So I think the ability, whatever those changes are, to measure them, see did they have an impact, will require data, the insight, and then the ability to take action to say, actually, do you know what, let's stop that change, because actually it's not been the right one, cut it off, reinvest that fund somewhere else. Or, yes, that one variable we've changed has made an incremental change, let's do more of that. What's the next change we can make? What does the data tell us might be another complementary addition or change or enhancement we can do to drive customer experience? So hopefully that answers it, but if not, I'm happy to go. We have a minute left, so if there's any questions, if not, I will wrap there and hopefully catch some of you on the stand shortly. Thank you very much.